Oftentimes, we read explanations on Pesukim in the Torah from Chazal. The explanations can be from the Gemara or from one of the Midrashim, maybe Midrash Rabbah, Sifra, Sifrei Mechilta. And sometimes Rashi brings these explanations as well in his Perush. How are we to relate to these explanations? So first of all, welcome to Torah Andalus. As you know, we study Torah here in accordance with the wisdom of Chachmei Andalusia, and that's what we're going to be doing right now. And in a sense, we are exploring new terrain, which is old terrain. The roads were always there. They were always set forth before us by the Chachamim of Andalusia. It's just been that over centuries and centuries and centuries, these roads have been neglected. So I'm very excited to share with you some of the Hidushim in the Torah and the approaches to Torah based on the wisdom of Chachmei Andalusia. So, to the question that I asked, how are we to relate to Midrashim? Many times you have Midrashim on Pesukim, and if you look at the Pasuk, for example, you look at Ibn Ezra, Rabbi Aram Ibn Ezra always like the Peshat of the Pasuk, and he often seems to disagree with Chachamim say. He gives an explanation on the Pesukim that is oftentimes at variance with the explanation given by the Chachamim. So what are we to make of that? Is it to say, well, I accept Ibn Ezra, I reject Chachamim, the Perush of the Chachamim doesn't make sense, right? So that's one approach, and I see that approach in the community, where people say, no, we can only follow Peshat. So the Peshat is, as Ibn Ezra explained the Peshat, and it doesn't have to be Ibn Ezra, it could be Ibn Sa'ad Gaon, for example. But then you have others who say, no, if the Chachamim gave us an explanation, that explanation is the correct explanation. There can be no disagreement with the Chachamim. And therefore, if the Peshat of the Pasuk says one thing, and the Chachamim say another thing, of course, we should go by the Chachamim. And I think both approaches have a certain validity to that. You know, if you have a Pasuk, we have a Kelah and Mikra, Yosef Midei Peshuto. If you have a Pasuk, you have to read the Pasuk as it was given to us, right? The Torah was expressed to us in language, in human language, and as human beings, we have to process these words and understand the meaning of the words. But on the other hand, the other position, which says, no, we have Chazal. Chazal tells us what the Pesukim mean. We can't ignore Chazal. That's correct. So what do we do with this? I want to explain that. Let me explain it as follows, and then I'm going to read to you the greatest of Chachmei Andalusia, which of course was Rambam. So, there is no real contradiction in a pasuk where the peshat, the simple meaning, is one way, and the derasha of Chachamim, where they give a different explanation based upon a derasha. There is no contradiction. Right? How can that be? Because, as my father wrote in the Golden Doves, the Pesukim allow for a multiplicity of meanings to coexist. My father refers to the polysemic nature of the biblical text, right? Polysemic nature means there is many different meanings that can arise from one verse. These different meanings are not mutually exclusive, but rather these different meanings can coexist, and they coexist comfortably and effectively. So I want to read to you a pasuk. This is in Perashat Ki Teseh, in the book of Devarim. At the beginning of the Perashah, it says as follows. It's talking about it's not at the beginning of the Perashah. It's in Perek Kafeh Pasuk Vav. Perek Kafeh Pasuk Vav, chapter 25, verse 6. It's talking about a situation where a wife lost her husband. The husband had no children whatsoever. According to halakha, the brother of the husband has to do yibum on the widow, on his brother's wife. He has to do yibum. Either he marries her, that's called yibum. Alternatively, he may choose not to marry her, in which case he does halisa. Right? Here's the pasuk that says, in case he did yibum. What is the purpose of doing yibum? Why do we obligate the living brother to marry the wife of his dead brother, right? So the pasuk explains it. It's a very simple pasuk. והיה הבכור אשר תלד יקום על שם אחיו המת. Because what's going to happen is this lady will now give birth to a son, the widow will give birth to a son from the living brother, obviously, and this son will be the firstborn, and he will be the namesake of the dead brother, right? So the dead brother has no children, and now the living brother will have a child with the widow, and this child will be associated with or attributed to the dead brother, and in this way there's a continuity to the name of the dead brother. Al Shem Achiv Hamet v'lo yimacheh shemo miYisrael, because otherwise the name of the dead brother will be wiped out from Israel because he would have no children. So by having children, this will continue, so to speak, the dead brother's legacy. The pasuk is very simple. V'haya habechor asher teled means the firstborn that the widow gives birth to. The only thing is the Chachamim give a completely different explanation. The Chachamim say, what does it mean by V'haya habechor asher teled? It means that if the dead brother had several living brothers, not one, let's say he had several living brothers, which one of them should do yibum on the widow? And the answer is the firstborn, meaning the oldest of the living brothers should do yibum on the widow. And how do they learn it? Because the pasuk says, "V'haya habechor asher teled." The firstborn. So the way the Hachamim understand the pasuk is, the firstborn of the mom of the dead brother, her firstborn, should do yibum on the widow, right? Okay. Let me read to you Harambam Hilchot Yibum HaChalisa Perek Bet Halacha Vav. Mi shemet v'hiniach achim rabim. If a person died and he left several brothers, Misvah al gadol le'yaber. The misvah is that the oldest of the living brothers should do yibum on the widow. Or lachalos, or he can do chalisa if he chooses. Shene'eman be'ayad bechol asher teled. And how do we know that the oldest of the living brothers should do yibum on the widow? Because it says be'ayad bechol asher teled, right? We have a tradition that says she'eno medaber ela bechol shel achim. We have a tradition that says when it says hayah bechol asher teled, it's referring to the firstborn of the living brothers. So this isn't just a derasha, it's not just a remez, it's not just some, yag midot, it's mipia shemuah. Right? Mipia shemuah means this is an ancient, authoritative, binding explanation of the pasuk. This isn't somebody giving an opinion in the Gemara, which may or may not be accepted, or you have different derashot. No, this is mipia shemuah. Mipia shemuah la'anu she'enu medaber ela b'bechor shel achim. Right? So we have this tradition that explains the pasuk. Here's the problem. That explanation doesn't make sense in the context of the Peshat. Because later on it says, Yakum al Shem Achiv Hamet. Right? What does it mean, Yakum al Shem Achiv Hamet? How can you say that the oldest brother will now come in place of the dead brother, al Shem Achiv Hamet? It's referring to the child of the oldest brother, which will be now, who does Yibum, presumptively, will be in place of the dead brother's name. So I want to read you what Harambam says. There's no contradiction. That's the polysemic nature of the Chumash, right? Kitvei HaKodesh, right? This text was written in Ruach HaKodesh. It's subject to many different meanings, right? And he says, Harambam, V'zeh shene'emar asher telev, mashma'o asher l'alidah ha'em. When the pasuk says "V'haya bechor asher teled," the bechor that will be born, it's referring to the bechor that was born from the mom of the dead brother, meaning the oldest living brother has to make yibum. And then he says, "Im mashma asher teled hayevama," and this is together with the peshat of the pasuk, which says asher teled, and the peshat says it's the widow who gives birth, right? Im mashma, you like that? Again, v'zeh shenemar asher teled, mashma'o, the meaning is asher l'alidah ha'em. That's the meaning given mipia shemuah. It coexists. Im mashma asher teled hayevama. it coexists with the explanation that the Bechor, that the widow will give birth to from one of the living brothers, will come in place or will be the continuation of the name of the dead brother. This is so important. Ibn Ezra didn't reject the Derashot HaChachamim, Chas v'Shalom. And when the Chachamim gave Derashot, they didn't reject the Peshat of the Pasuk, right? Rather, this is just part of Western thinking. Western thinking loves to create these oppositions, these fictional oppositions. This is against that. There's always a class warfare. Blacks against whites. The poor against the rich. Everybody, has to be against everybody. The Torah doesn't take that view, right? These two separate explanations exist well together, and both things are correct. It is correct that the oldest of the living brothers should make ibum on the widow. It is also correct that when the widow gives birth to a bechor, that bechor will be the continuation and the namesake of the dead brother.